The fluorescent lights hummed like wasps above my cubicle. The same cubicle I'd walked past for years as a manager, never imagining I'd be trapped inside it. 6 months ago, they stripped me of everything: my title, my team, my dignity. They called it restructuring. I called it betrayal. But from this cramped corner of corporate hell, I discovered something they'd tried so desperately to hide. Now, as I watch them scramble through the glass walls of the conference room, their faces pale with panic, I know the truth. Revenge isn't just sweet, it's necessary. My name is Evelyn Carter. And until 6 months ago, I was somebody. At 34, I'd spent 8 years climbing the ladder at Harper & Vail Consulting, one of Denver's most prestigious financial consulting firms. My office on the 14th floor had a view of the Rocky Mountains, and my team of 12 analysts respected me, or so I thought. I remember the weight of those years, each one heavier than the last. 60-hour weeks were my normal. I missed my sister's wedding rehearsal dinner to close the Morrison Industries deal. I worked through pneumonia during the Q3 audit season. My laptop knew my face better than my own mirror did. While my college friends posted pictures of their growing families and European vacations, I posted nothing. I was too busy building something I believed mattered. The morning it happened started like any other. January 15th, 2025. I'd arrived at 6:47 a.m., beating even the security guard's full alertness. My presentation for the Brennan Group merger was polished to perfection, every projection triple-checked, every risk assessment bulletproof. The coffee was still brewing in the break room when Rebecca Mills called me into her office. Rebecca had been my mentor once. We'd shared late-night strategy sessions and celebrated wins over champagne that cost more than most people's car payments. I'd trusted her with my fears, my ambitions, even my father's cancer diagnosis last year. That morning, she sat behind her glass desk with an expression I'd never seen before, somewhere between pity and satisfaction. "Evelyn, I need you to understand this isn't personal," she began, her manicured fingers drumming against a folder I hadn't noticed before. "The board has been conducting performance reviews, and there are concerns about your leadership capabilities." The words hit me like ice water. My leadership? Rebecca? My team just delivered the highest revenue quarter in the division's history. We've exceeded every metric. It's not about the numbers. She opened the folder, revealing what I now know was a carefully orchestrated character assassination. There have been complaints. Your management style is described as inflexible. Several team members have expressed concerns about your ability to adapt to our evolving corporate culture. Evolving corporate culture. The phrase would haunt me for weeks. What it really meant was that Marcus Stern, Rebecca's golf buddy and recent MBA graduate with no actual experience, needed a position that justified his salary. My position. Effective immediately, you're being reassigned to Strategic Support Services. She slid a new contract across the desk. It's a lateral move that will allow you to develop the soft skills necessary for future leadership opportunities. Lateral move, another corporate euphemism. This one meaning a 60% pay cut and a desk in the basement, literally. Strategic Support Services was where careers went to die. A dumping ground for employees the company couldn't legally fire but wanted to forget existed. I remember staring at my hands, noting absurdly that I needed a manicure. 8 years of sacrifice had just been erased in a 10-minute conversation. Every presentation I'd perfected, every client relationship I'd cultivated, every weekend I'd sacrificed. None of it had protected me from this moment. "I don't understand," I finally managed, though understanding was already creeping in like a slow poison. "Last month you put me forward for the executive development program." Rebecca's smile was rehearsed, sympathetic in the way politicians are when they're about to cut funding for something vital. "The landscape has changed, Evelyn. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the greater good of the organization." The greater good, I would later learn that the greater good meant Rebecca needed my position empty to promote Marcus, who happened to be the son of a potential investor whose backing she desperately needed for her own advancement to the C-suite. That afternoon, I packed my office while my former team watched through the glass walls, some with genuine sympathy, Others with the kind of relief that comes from knowing the axe didn't fall on them. Not one of them offered to help carry my boxes. The basement office, if you could call it that, was a converted storage room wedged between the server room and the building's mechanical systems. The constant hum of machines became my new soundtrack, replacing the energetic buzz of the 14th floor. My desk was a reject from the 1990s, its fake wood veneer peeling at the corners. Above me, I could hear footsteps from the lobby, each one a reminder that life continued upstairs while I rotted below. Strategic Support Services consisted of 3 other casualties of corporate politics. Harold, who'd been there so long he'd become part of the furniture. Janet, demoted after reporting sexual harassment, and Kyle, a formerly rising star who'd made the mistake of opposing Rebecca in a board meeting. We were the ghosts of Harper and Vale, visible only when someone needed mundane data entry or filing that even the interns considered beneath them. The humiliation was surgical in its precision. My first assignment came from Marcus Stern himself, my replacement. He strutted into the basement on my 3rd day, his Tom Ford suit incongruous against the water-stained ceiling tiles. "Evelyn, right?" He knew exactly who I was. "I need you to compile all the client contact sheets from your previous role. Rebecca wants them organized by revenue potential." He dropped a flash drive on my desk like he was tipping a waitress. "End of day works for you?" It was my own database he was asking me to organize. The system I'd built from scratch, now being handed over to someone who couldn't distinguish a P&L statement from a grocery list. I spent 6 hours transferring my professional life's work to the man who'd stolen my position. Each click of the mouse, another small death. The emails were worse than the face-to-face encounters. I'd been removed from all important chains, but somehow remained on the company-wide announcements. Every Monday brought fresh torture. Please join us in congratulating Marcus Stern on securing the Whitfield account. The Whitfield account I'd spent 3 months cultivating. My relationships, my groundwork, now bearing his name. Former colleagues treated me like I had something contagious. Sarah Chen from Acquisitions, who used to grab lunch with me weekly, now took the stairs to avoid passing the basement. Tom Martinez, whose career I'd saved more than once, looked through me like I was transparent when we met in the parking garage. The only acknowledgement I received was the occasional pitying glance or the awkward half-smile reserved for the professionally deceased. But it was the break room encounters that cut deepest. Conversations would halt mid-sentence when I entered, resuming in hushed tones after I left. Once, I overheard 2 junior analysts I'd mentored. "God, did you see her shuffling those papers for Marcus? How the mighty have fallen." I heard she had a breakdown in Rebecca's office, begged for her job back. Rebecca says she never had what it takes for real leadership. Too rigid, too old school. Too old school. Translation: I refuse to inflate numbers and kiss the right asses. Rebecca's masterstroke came during the February all-hands meeting. She presented the quarterly projections, my projections, prepared weeks before my demotion. As the brilliant new direction under Marcus's leadership, she stood at the podium, her red Louboutins clicking against the stage, and praised the fresh perspective and innovative thinking he'd brought to the role. I watched from the back row, assigned to take notes for development purposes. Rebecca's eyes found mine once during her presentation. A brief moment of contact that said everything. I won. You lost. Accept it. That night, I sat in my studio apartment, the one I'd downsized to after the pay cut, and stared at my laptop screen. My LinkedIn profile still listed me as Senior Project Manager. I couldn't bring myself to update it to Strategic Support Specialist, corporate speak for nobody. The cursor blinked at me, waiting for honesty I couldn't provide. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How's the new position treating you, sweetie? Your father and I are so proud of your promotion." I told them it was a promotion. How could I explain that their daughter, the one they'd bragged about at every family gathering, was now filing expense reports for a 26-year-old nepotism hire? That the MBA they'd helped pay for was now worthless as I alphabetized contact lists in a fluorescent-lit tomb. I poured another glass of wine, the cheap kind now, not the Napa Valley Reserve I used to afford. and opened my personal laptop. That's when I began to notice things. Little discrepancies in the files Marcus had me organizing, numbers that didn't quite add up, client billing that seemed inflated. At first, I dismissed it as his incompetence, but incompetence doesn't look like patterns. And what I was seeing definitely had a pattern. The pattern became clearer on a Thursday night in March. I was alone in the basement, organizing invoices for the Brennan Group merger, work that Marcus had dumped on me at 4:58 p.m., naturally. The building was quiet except for the janitor's cart squeaking somewhere above. That's when I found it, a billing statement that didn't match the contract terms I'd originally negotiated. We were charging Brennan Group for consulting hours that never happened. Phantom meetings, fictional strategy sessions, even travel expenses for trips that existed only on paper. The overcharge was subtle, about $400,000 spread across multiple line items, but it was there. And Rebecca's digital signature authorized every single one. My hands trembled as I cross-referenced the files. This wasn't incompetence or a clerical error. This was fraud. I should have felt vindicated. I should have immediately thought about whistleblowing or reporting it. Instead, I felt something else entirely: opportunity. For the first time since my demotion, the constant ache in my chest loosened. The humiliation that had been eating me alive transformed into something sharper, more focused. I stayed until 2 a.m. that night, copying files onto my personal drive. The next day, I volunteered to help with more filing work for the merger. Marcus was thrilled to offload more tedious tasks, never suspecting that his laziness was handing me ammunition. Over the next 2 weeks, I uncovered the full scope of the scheme. It wasn't just Brennan Group. Harper & Vail had been systematically overcharging at least 6 major clients, all companies in the middle of complex mergers or acquisitions where inflated bills could easily disappear into the chaos. The total exceeded $3 million. Rebecca, Marcus, and 2 other executives, David Huang from Finance and Patricia Morse from Legal, had their fingerprints all over it. The revelation changed everything. My basement exile transformed from a tomb into a hunting blind. Every dismissive email from Rebecca, every condescending request from Marcus, every pitying look from former colleagues, they all became fuel for something that had been dead inside me: purpose. I remember the exact moment my victimhood died and something else was born. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus had sent me to fetch coffee for his client meeting, a task so demeaning that even Kyle looked at me with sympathy. As I carried the tray of overpriced lattes past the conference room, I caught a glimpse of Rebecca through the glass. She was laughing, her head thrown back, probably at some joke about quarterly projections or tax loopholes. She looked so comfortable, so untouchable in her ivory blazer and pearl earrings. That's when I decided I wasn't going to just expose her. I was going to destroy her. The transformation was physical. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize. The defeated woman who'd been sleepwalking through humiliation was gone. My eyes, which had been dull for months, now held something that scared and thrilled me in equal measure. It wasn't rage. Rage is hot and reckless. This was cold, calculating, patient. I started treating my basement prison like a military operation. Every document that passed through my hands was photographed. Every overheard conversation was noted. I created encrypted folders with evidence, backed up in 3 different cloud services. I learned Rebecca's patterns: when she stayed late, Tuesdays and Thursdays, who she met with off the books, David Huang, always at the coffee shop 2 blocks over, when she was most likely to make mistakes, Friday afternoons after her liquid lunches. The beauty of being invisible is that people forget you're there. They speak freely around furniture, and that's what I'd become. During a fire drill, I slipped into Rebecca's office and photographed documents she'd carelessly left on her desk. While organizing the supply closet next to the small conference room, I overheard her and Patricia discussing how to handle the situation if anyone noticed the discrepancies. "We pin it on the previous management," Patricia said. "Evelyn's sloppy record-keeping made it impossible to track properly. They were planning to frame me for their crimes. The audacity of it should have enraged me. Instead, It crystallized my resolve. They weren't just thieves. They were cowards ready to destroy what was left of my reputation to save themselves. I began to see the whole picture. This wasn't just about money, it was about Rebecca's ambition. She needed these inflated numbers to show growth, to justify her push for the C-suite. The fraud was her ladder. And my career had been collateral damage, cleared away to make room for Marcus, who was too stupid and grateful to notice or care what he was signing. For the first time in months, I slept without wine. I didn't need it anymore. The crushing weight of humiliation had been replaced by something that sang in my veins, the promise of revenge. They thought they'd buried me, but they'd actually given me the perfect vantage point to watch them build their house of cards. And I was going to be the wind that knocked it down. The plan required precision. I couldn't just dump evidence on someone's desk and hope for justice. Rebecca had too many allies, too much influence. I needed to build an airtight case that would destroy not just her career, but the entire network that enabled her. My first move was reaching out to Daniel Reeves, a corporate attorney I'd met years ago at a conference. Daniel specialized in whistleblower cases and had a reputation for taking down corrupt executives. We met at a diner in Aurora, 30 miles from downtown Denver, where no one from Harper & Vale would accidentally spot us. $3 million in fraudulent billing. Daniel's eyebrows rose as he reviewed my initial evidence. Evelyn, this is significant, but we need more than spreadsheets. We need communications, emails, recorded conversations, anything that shows intent. I can get them, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Be careful. If they suspect you're gathering evidence, they'll bury you legally before you can blink. But I was already past careful. I was methodical. I invested in a digital voice recorder the size of a lipstick and learned Colorado's one-party consent laws for recording conversations. I stayed late every night, using my basement access to map the building's digital infrastructure. The IT department ignored me. I was just the fallen executive doing menial work. They never noticed when I figured out that the executive floor's conference room recordings, supposedly deleted after each meeting, were actually archived on a server I could access from my dungeon. The breakthrough came when Marcus, in his infinite arrogance, gave me his login credentials to upload some files. Just use my account, he said, tossing the post-it note at me. I can't be bothered with this grunt work. He changed his password weekly for security, but he also kept the pattern predictable. His birth date plus the current month. Within days, I had access to his entire email history. The emails were a goldmine. Rebecca instructing Marcus to adjust the Brennan numbers. David Huang explaining how to hide the overcharges in legitimate-looking categories. Patricia Morse drafting legal language that would protect them if questioned. And most damning, a thread where Rebecca explicitly stated, Evelyn's demotion gives us the perfect opportunity to restructure the books without oversight. I was literally named as the obstacle they'd removed to commit fraud. But the recording that sealed their fate came accidentally. I was organizing files in the basement storage room next to the executive bathroom, a dead zone everyone forgot existed. Through the ventilation system, I could hear Rebecca and David's conversation clearly. The auditors are coming next quarter, David said. We need to clean this up. We blame the discrepancies on the transition period, Rebecca replied. Evelyn's incompetence left us with a mess to sort through. A few backdated corrections, and we're clear. And if she fights back? With what credibility? She's a basement-dwelling nobody who couldn't handle the pressure. Who's going to believe her over us? I recorded every word. The next phase required external validation. I reached out to former clients. Carefully, using my personal email. 3 responded. They'd all noticed billing irregularities but assumed they were mistakes. When I showed them the patterns, they agreed to provide statements to Daniel. Creating secure backups became an obsession. I stored evidence on encrypted drives hidden in my apartment, in a safety deposit box, and with Daniel. I created a detailed timeline linking every fraudulent transaction to specific emails and recordings. The case was becoming bulletproof. The paranoia was justified. One evening, I returned to my desk to find items slightly rearranged. My computer had been accessed. IT logs showed a remote login at 3 a.m. Rebecca was getting suspicious. I started leaving false trails, dummy files with incorrect information to throw them off. I acted more defeated than ever, even staging a tearful breakdown in the bathroom where I knew gossipy Jennifer from HR would overhear. I just want my old life back. I sobbed loudly. I'll do anything to prove I'm worthy again. Jennifer spread the word that I was finally accepting reality. Rebecca relaxed. Meanwhile, Daniel connected me with investigative journalist Sarah Walsh from the Denver Post, who'd been tracking corporate fraud in the consulting industry. She was hungry for a story like this, a perfect storm of embezzlement, betrayal, and corporate politics. By April, I had everything: emails, recordings, financial documents, client testimonials, and a clear paper trail showing how Rebecca had orchestrated both the fraud and my demotion to eliminate oversight. The evidence filled 3 bankers' boxes. Copies, of course. The originals were safe in multiple locations. Daniel reviewed everything one last night at his office. Evelyn, this is enough to trigger a federal investigation. The FBI's white-collar crime division will be very interested. But once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. They'll come at you with everything they have. I thought about the months of humiliation, the pitying looks, the basement office, my stolen career, my reputation in tatters. Rebecca's smug smile as she presented my work as Marcus's innovation. They already took everything from me, I said. Now it's my turn. Daniel nodded and picked up his phone. Then, let's light the fuse. We scheduled the revelation for maximum impact, the day before Harper & Vale's biggest investor presentation of the year. When Rebecca was set to be announced as the new executive vice president, the timing wasn't just strategic, it was poetic. Living a double life was exhausting. By day, I perfected my performance as the broken woman, shuffling through the basement with downcast eyes, mechanically completing whatever degrading task Marcus threw my way. By night, I was a forensic accountant, a detective, a strategist planning corporate warfare. My apartment became a war room. Financial documents covered every surface, connected by color-coded strings like something from a conspiracy thriller. I survived on takeout and 3 hours of sleep, sustained by something stronger than caffeine, the intoxicating proximity to revenge. The paranoia intensified in May. Rebecca had definitely sensed something, though she couldn't pinpoint what. She started appearing in the basement more often, always with flimsy excuses. Just checking on our filing system, she'd say, her eyes scanning my desk, my face, looking for cracks in my defeated facade. I gave her what she wanted to see. I let my shoulders slump more, kept tissues visibly on my desk, wore the same rotate of 3 cheap blazers that screamed budget constraints. Once, I even deliberately let her catch me looking at job postings for entry-level positions in other cities. Thinking of leaving us, Evelyn? She asked, unable to hide her hopefulness. Just exploring options, I mumbled. Maybe a fresh start would be good. She practically glowed. That might be wise. I could even write you a recommendation for the right position, of course. The right position meaning anywhere but here. Anywhere she wouldn't have to see the evidence of her cruelty walking the halls. The danger became real when Kyle whispered a warning during a rare moment alone. It was asking about your computer usage, irregular access patterns or something. Watch yourself. That night, I created a virus. Nothing malicious. Just something to corrupt specific files on my work computer if anyone tried to access them remotely. The dummy files I'd planted would survive, but anything real would be destroyed. I also started carrying my evidence physically, using USB drives hidden in tampon boxes, inside old makeup compacts, places no corporate spy would think to look. Rebecca escalated her surveillance. She assigned Marcus to mentor me, which meant he sat in the basement for hours, pretending to review my work while obviously watching for suspicious behavior. I gave him the performance of his life. A broken woman grateful for his wisdom, hanging on his every empty word about professional development and growth mindset. You know, Evelyn, he said one afternoon, leaning back in his chair with manufactured casualness. Rebecca really does want what's best for you. She mentions you often. She does? I let hope creep into my voice. Oh, yes. She thinks with the right attitude adjustment, you could really thrive in a support role. Not everyone's meant for leadership, you know? I nodded eagerly, hating myself for how good I'd become at this charade. I'm starting to see that now. Rebecca was right. I wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. Marcus reported back to Rebecca that I was finally showing progress. The closest call came on a Wednesday night. I'd stayed late to access the executive server, downloading the final batch of emails I needed. I was so focused on the screen that I didn't hear the elevator. Footsteps in the hallway made my blood freeze. Rebecca's distinctive heel clicks. I had seconds. I killed the download, cleared the browser history, and pulled up a spreadsheet of supplier contracts. When she appeared in the doorway, I was highlighting cells with the dedication of someone who had nothing more important in their life. Working late again, Evelyn? Just trying to be thorough, I said, not looking up. These contracts have some discrepancies I wanted to flag for Marcus. She walked closer, close enough that I could smell her Tom Ford perfume. Find anything interesting? The double meaning wasn't subtle. I kept my voice steady. Just some vendor payment terms that need updating, nothing major. She stood there for a full minute, watching me highlight random cells. Finally, she spoke. You know, Evelyn, I've been thinking, maybe we've been too hard on you. Perhaps there's a future for you here after all. It was a test. She was dangling hope to see if I'd bite, if I'd reveal any ulterior motives. I looked up at her with carefully crafted vulnerability. Really? You think so? Well, that depends entirely on you, doesn't it? On your loyalty. I've always been loyal to Harper and Vale, I said. I'm not talking about the company. Her smile was sharp. I'm talking about knowing who your real friends are and who they aren't. The threat was clear. Stay in line, or things could get worse. I understand, I said, and I did. She was scared. After she left, I sat in the dark for an hour, letting my heart rate return to normal. Then I finished the download, backed up everything twice, and went home to prepare the final pieces of my plan. Sarah Walsh, the journalist, had been patient, but she was ready to move. My editor is asking questions, she told me over our burner phones. We need to publish soon, or they'll assign me to something else. 2 more weeks, I promised. I want this timed perfectly. Daniel had filed the preliminary whistleblower complaint under seal, protecting my identity temporarily while the FBI began their investigation. But I knew that wouldn't last. Once this broke, everyone would know it was me. I spent those final days in the basement like an actor preparing for closing night. Each humiliation, each condescending email, each pitying look. I absorbed them all, stored them up as fuel for what was coming. Rebecca had no idea that the broken woman in the basement was actually a lit fuse. And the explosion was days away. The hardest part was maintaining the facade when every cell in my body vibrated with anticipation. Revenge was so close I could taste it. The first strike was surgical. On a Thursday morning, 2 weeks before the investor presentation, I leaked a single document to Sarah Walsh, an email where Rebecca explicitly instructed David to bury the Brennan discrepancies where the auditors won't think to look. Sarah published a small item in the Denver Post's business section, framing it as an anonymous tip about accounting irregularities at Harper and Vale. The office erupted in whispers, but Rebecca remained calm. In an all-hands email, she dismissed it as baseless rumors from a disgruntled former employee, never naming me, but making it clear who she meant. The executive team rallied around her, publicly at least. But I watched the cracks form. David started taking lunch off campus. Patricia scheduled urgent meetings with outside counsel. Marcus, oblivious as always, asked me to pull 5 years of billing records just to be thorough. He had no idea he was asking me to hand him the very rope that would hang them all. The second leak was broader. Sarah published internal memos showing systematic overbilling across multiple accounts. This time, she named numbers: $3.2 million in questionable charges. Harper & Vale's stock dipped 4% in afternoon trading. Emergency meetings sprouted like mushrooms. Through the basement ceiling, I could hear the panic: raised voices, slamming doors, the frantic clicking of heels as executives rushed between offices. Rebecca sent another company-wide email, this one less composed, promising a thorough internal investigation to clear Harper & Vale's spotless reputation. That evening, she appeared in the basement. Not Marcus, not some lackey. Rebecca herself, her usually perfect composure showing cracks. "Evelyn," she said, her voice honeyed poison. "These leaks are unfortunate, damaging to everyone, including employees at your level." "It's terrible," I agreed, widening my eyes with false concern. "Who would do something like this?" She studied me for a long moment. "Someone with access to old files, someone with a grudge, someone who doesn't understand that destroying the company destroys everyone in it." "I hope you find them," I said earnestly. "Harper & Vale is my life. Even from down here, I'm still part of the family." My performance must have been convincing because she relaxed slightly. "Good. Because if I find out anyone in this department is involved, the consequences will be severe. Career ending, legal action, total destruction." After she left, I sent Sarah the recording of that conversation. Threatening potential whistleblowers was another federal crime to add to Rebecca's growing list. The third strike was devastating. Sarah published Rebecca's emails about framing me for the discrepancies, complete with her statement that my demotion removed the obstacle to their scheme. The article included client statements confirming they'd been overcharged and quoted an unnamed FBI source confirming an active investigation into potential wire fraud. The state attorney general's office announced they were opening their own investigation. 3 major clients publicly announced they were reviewing their contracts with Harper & Vale. The stock price plummeted 12%, but the masterstroke was the timing. All of this hit exactly 1 week before the investor presentation. Too late for damage control, but early enough for every potential investor to see the headlines. Inside Harper & Vale, it was chaos. The board called an emergency meeting. Rebecca was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Corporate speak for, "You're fired, but we need to do it legally." David Huang was escorted from the building by security. Patricia Morse resigned to pursue other opportunities, which everyone knew meant her law license was in jeopardy. Marcus, in a display of spectacular cowardice, threw everyone under the bus. He claimed complete ignorance, said he'd been manipulated by Rebecca, and offered to cooperate fully with investigators. He actually came to the basement, pale and sweating, asking me to confirm that he'd always treated me with respect. "You need to tell them I wasn't involved," he pleaded. "You know I'm not smart enough to pull something like this off." It was the first honest thing he'd ever said to me. The beautiful part was that no one suspected the basement dwelling. Broken Evelyn Carter was the architect of their destruction. They were too busy turning on each other, trying to save themselves. Rebecca accused David of being the leak. David pointed fingers at Patricia. Patricia hired a separate legal team and stopped talking to everyone. I continued my performance, showing up every day, filing papers, acting shocked by each new revelation. When coworkers asked my opinion, I'd shake my head sadly and say, "I just hope the company survives this." But I knew it wouldn't, not in its current form. The investor presentation was canceled. The FBI seized computers and files. Forensic accountants swarmed the executive floor while I sat in my basement, organizing spreadsheets, invisible and victorious. The day Rebecca was officially terminated. I watched from the lobby as she carried her banker's box to the elevator. She looked smaller somehow. Her designer suit wrinkled, her perfect hair slightly mussed. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw a flicker of something, not recognition of what I'd done, but a dawning awareness that she'd underestimated me fatally. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded, the same professional nod I'd given her 1,000 times before. Then I turned and walked back to my basement. leaving her standing there with the wreckage of her ambition. The complete unraveling came on a Tuesday morning in June. Sarah Walsh's final article was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, featuring excerpts from the FBI's unsealed indictment. Rebecca Mills, David Huang, and Patricia Morse faced charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The dollar amount had grown to $4.7 million across 8 clients. But the press conference was what I'd been waiting for. Federal prosecutor James Thornton stood before a crowd of reporters, laying out the evidence in damning detail. Behind him, enlarged exhibits showed Rebecca's emails, the fraudulent invoices, the trail of deception I'd meticulously documented. This case was brought to our attention by a courageous whistleblower, Thornton announced, whose thorough documentation made this investigation possible. I watched from my basement computer, filing routine reports while my former tormentors were destroyed on live television. The federal agents arrived at Harper & Vale that afternoon. They wanted Rebecca's files, but also needed someone who understood the filing system. Naturally, they came to Strategic Support Services. Ms. Carter, Agent Jennifer Reese said, "We understand you previously held Rebecca Mills's current position." "I did," I confirmed, maintaining my helpful but wounded demeanor. "We need someone to walk us through these financial records. Would you be willing to assist?" I spent 3 days with the FBI, explaining every document, every transaction, every hidden trail Rebecca thought she'd buried. I was professional, thorough, and devastating. Each file I explained was another nail in her coffin. The panic from the executive floor was palpable. Those who'd survived the initial purge were terrified they'd be next. The board brought in crisis management consultants who interviewed everyone, including the basement staff. When they reached me, I gave them exactly what they expected: a competent employee who'd been unfairly demoted but remained loyal to the company despite everything. "You've been through a lot, Ms. Carter," the lead consultant said, reviewing my file. "Your previous performance reviews were exemplary." "I've tried to maintain my professionalism," I replied quietly. What came next, I hadn't planned for but should have expected. Marcus, desperate to save himself, broke completely. He showed up at my desk on a Thursday evening, drunk and pathetic. "It was all Rebecca," he slurred. "She promised me everything if I just did what she said. I didn't know about the fraud, I swear." "Marcus, you should go home." "No, you have to listen." He grabbed my arm. "She told me to destroy you, said you were too smart, too ethical, said you'd notice things." I pulled out my phone, ostensibly to call him a cab but actually to record. "She laughed about it," he continued, tears streaming down his face. "Said watching you grovel in the basement was better than firing you. Said it was poetic justice for all the times you made her feel stupid in meetings." "I never." "You did. Just by being better. She hated you for it. We all did." His confession poured out like sewage. "You worked harder, knew more, actually gave a damn about the clients. It made the rest of us look bad." The next morning, Marcus's resignation was on the CEO's desk, though I doubt he remembered submitting it. The crescendo came when Rebecca's lawyer reached out to Daniel Reeves, trying to negotiate a plea deal. She was willing to testify against David and Patricia in exchange for reduced charges. But she needed the whistleblower's cooperation, my cooperation. Daniel arranged the meeting in his office. Rebecca didn't know I'd be there. When she walked in and saw me, her face went through a spectacular range of emotions: confusion, realization, rage, and finally, defeat. "You," she breathed. I said nothing, just watched her process the truth. "How long?" she finally asked. "Since March, when I found the first fraudulent invoice." She sank into a chair, her designer facade crumbling. "I underestimated you." "No," I corrected. "You dismissed me. There's a difference." Her lawyer tried to salvage the meeting, outlining their offer. Rebecca would admit to everything, serve time, pay restitution. In exchange, she wanted me to support a reduced sentence, to testify that she'd shown remorse. "She destroyed my career to cover her crimes," I told the lawyer calmly. She tried to frame me for fraud. She subjected me to months of humiliation. What remorse has she shown? Rebecca looked up then, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. Please, she said. I have 2 kids. My husband left when the news broke. I've lost everything. So did I reminded her. The difference is, I didn't commit fraud to lose it. The meeting ended with Rebecca's lawyer promising they'd proceed without my cooperation. As she stood to leave, Rebecca turned back one last time. The board wants to see you tomorrow, she said quietly. They're going to offer you your job back, maybe even mine. I already knew. The interim CEO had called that morning. Evelyn, Rebecca said, something desperate in her voice. When you're sitting in that executive office, when you have that power, remember this moment. Remember how easy it was for me to destroy you. Remember how much easier it'll be for someone to destroy you now that you've shown them how it's done. It was meant as a threat, but it sounded more like a prophecy from a fallen oracle. The next day, the Denver Post ran a feature story. The whistleblower in the basement, how one woman brought down a corporate conspiracy. Sarah Walsh had won a Pulitzer for her reporting. My name was finally public. My story told. The meeting with the board was scheduled for 2 p.m. The same elevator that had taken me down to the basement now carried me back to the 14th floor, but I wasn't the same person who'd made that descent 6 months ago. The boardroom hadn't changed, the same mahogany table, the same panoramic view of the Rockies, the same oil painting of Harper & Vale's founders. But the faces around the table were different. Half the board had resigned in disgrace. The survivors looked at me with a mixture of respect and fear. Ms. Carter, the interim CEO, William Brennan, began. We owe you an apology and a debt of gratitude. Your actions saved this company from complete destruction. They offered me everything, my old position back, a promotion to senior vice president, a salary that doubled my previous compensation, and a corner office with Rebecca's view. They practically begged me to help rebuild Harper & Vale's reputation. I let them finish their pitch, then stood and walked to the window where Rebecca used to stand during her presentations. 6 months ago, I said, turning to face them, I would have killed for this offer. I would have seen it as vindication, as justice. And now? Brennan asked. Now I see it for what it is. Desperation? You need me to be your redemption story. The whistleblower who came back to save the company that wronged her. It would make great PR. The board members exchanged glances. They hadn't expected resistance. What do you want? One of them asked. I thought about Rebecca in her lawyer's office, broken and pleading. I thought about Marcus, drowning in his own mediocrity. I thought about the months in the basement, the humiliation, the transformation from victim to architect of destruction. I want Rebecca's office cleaned out by tomorrow, I said. I want Marcus's name removed from every project he stole from me. I want written apologies from everyone who participated in my demotion, to be published in the company newsletter. They nodded eagerly, sensing a negotiation. And then, I continued, I want to never step foot in this building again. The silence was absolute. Ms. Carter, Brennan stammered, surely we can. You can't. I cut him off. You had something valuable once, my loyalty, my dedication, my integrity. You threw it away for a fraud scheme that netted you nothing but federal investigations and public humiliation. I'm not here to save you. I pulled out my phone and showed them an email from my new employer, a boutique consulting firm in Seattle that had been following the case. They'd offered me a partnership, a fresh start, and most importantly, respect. But the company, one board member pleaded, we need someone who understands. You need someone you haven't destroyed, I corrected. Good luck finding them. I headed for the door, then stopped. There was one more thing. There's a woman named Janet in Strategic Support Services. She was demoted for reporting sexual harassment. There's Harold, who's been forgotten for a decade. Kyle, who was punished for having integrity. If you want to start rebuilding, start with them. The basement is full of people you've broken. Try fixing them instead of hiding them. The elevator ride down was different this time. I stopped at the basement one last time. My desk was exactly as I'd left it that morning, organized, impersonal, temporary. I picked up the one personal item I'd kept there, a small cactus that had somehow thrived despite the fluorescent lights and recycled air. Janet looked up from her desk. "Heard you told the board to go to hell." "Not in those words." She smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her in months. "Good for you." I handed her a business card from the Seattle firm. "They're hiring. Tell them I sent you." 2 weeks later, I stood in my new office in Seattle, unpacking boxes of a life I was rebuilding. The local news was playing Rebecca's sentencing: 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, $2 million in restitution. David got 4 years. Patricia was disbarred. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw the news. So proud of you, sweetie. Dad says you're his hero." I'd finally told them everything. That evening, I sat in my Seattle apartment, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. The cactus from my basement desk sat on the windowsill, still thriving. My laptop was open to an email from Sarah Walsh, asking if I'd consider writing a book about the experience. Maybe I would. Maybe I'd tell the whole story, not just the fraud and the revenge, but the cost of both. The nights I couldn't sleep, the relationships I'd sacrificed, the piece of my soul I'd traded for justice. Or maybe revenge. I still wasn't sure there was a difference. My phone rang. Unknown Denver number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Evelyn." The voice was Rebecca's, calling from federal detention. "I just wanted you to know. I would have done the same thing. If I were you, I would have destroyed me too." "I know," I said, and hung up. That's the thing about revenge they don't tell you in the movies. It doesn't heal you. It doesn't restore what was taken. It just ensures that the people who hurt you pay a price. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it has to be. I closed my laptop and poured a glass of wine. The good stuff again. Tomorrow, I'd start my new job, building something instead of destroying it. But tonight, I sat with the truth that I'd become someone I never wanted to be: cold, calculating, capable of systematic destruction. Rebecca had been right about one thing. I'd shown them all how it's done. The question now is whether I could live with who I'd become to do it. The cactus bloomed that night, a small purple flower emerging from its thorny body. I took it as a sign beauty could grow from the harshest conditions, even in the basement, even in revenge, even in whatever came next. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and redemption. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of justice served cold resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Evelyn's position? Let me know in the comments below.